You're listening to the Game of Inches podcast, powered by Mayflower Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Jacob Smith and Andrew McInnes.
One week off, but we are back in action here. That intro is getting me fired up every single time. Game of Inches podcast, Jake and Andrew. And we had last week off the podcast. We had our very first event, the golf tournament, and it was fun, man. It was a success. A lot of people came out, a lot of positive feedback. And if you guys are checking out our Instagrams or Facebook and our social medias, you can see some pictures and the winners. And I'm posting a video today actually about the highlights of the playoff. I mean, I think it's pretty sick that I went to a playoff, man, for our very first ever tournament.
Yeah, the boys had some disgusting scores out there, minus 12 to end the day. For those that have played Avon or that were a part of the tournament, know in a scramble, minus 12 is a really good score. It's nothing like crazy where you're like, I don't know if I believe that, but definitely there was a few teams that were, I would say, a little bit ahead of the rest of the pack. There was 2 minus 12s. There was a minus 9. I'm pretty sure there was a minus 8. Then there was a couple like minus 5 sprinkled in. So the two teams that finished minus 12, they definitely separated themselves. Closest to the pin, obviously, there was a nail biter. There was 3 that were within, I think, 7. I can't even remember what it was. But so the winning one was, I think it was within 3 feet to the cup, and I think. Yeah, so I think there was 3 closest to the pins that were separated by 7 inches, and the winning one was within 3 feet. So that one was a cool one. The longest drive, I can't remember the guy's name who won, but he absolutely piped that up there. Some people were saying it was like over 300 yards, which
wow.
It was, if anybody knows, like it's a long par 5, hole number 2 that we did it on. I think it's like 500 and some odd yards, and like to the top of the hills, like probably like 3 something, and he was like, I would say like 3/4 of the way up the hill. So like he absolutely clobbered one. And then the straightest drive, I think it was within 2 feet of the string, I think it was, or like 1.5 feet or something. So someone really stuck the drive in the straightest drive. So it was a cool event for our first time. It was nice to have the boys out there supporting, and also having people that we didn't know. There was quite a few people there that we both kind of talked about afterwards, where it was like, man, we met a lot of new people today.
Yeah.
Like, I wasn't expecting this.
But that was like my instant reaction, like I showed up later, wasn't there early, like off the get-go. And like when I first got there, I was looking forward to like seeing familiar faces. Just thought I'd show up, like talk to the boys, like start throwing some chirps around. And I was like, oh man, like I don't recognize you, and I don't recognize you either. And I was like, getting some pictures. I had the camera with me, and it was cool. It was almost like better because people were like, yeah, for sure. Like you can get some pictures, or like, we want the memories and stuff like that. But I figured I would see like some of the boys that, like your buddies that I know that play golf there and stuff like that. But yeah, it was sweet seeing that. And it was actually the first time I've ever, like, I knew what a shotgun tee time was, but it was the first time I've ever really seen that in action. And I got to say, I feel like this definitely probably doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but for me, it seems like confusing. Like because I've played Avon with you a couple times, and like, I don't know, I'm just like used to the order we play that course. And especially if you're a member, like I'd be just used to playing like 1 to 18. So I thought it was kind of cool, like just seeing different people at different holes and just driving around the cart, getting some pictures. And, shout out to the sponsors as well. Black Harbor Distillery, that was the popular one. That was huge. A lot of people were loving the drinks. So shout out to Jamie.
They left a lasting impression. Yeah, shout out to Black Harbor. They did their thing. Sleeman's, Molson Coors hooking us up with the mini fridge for the closest to the pin. Munchies with the mystery box. Exquisite Cuts with the haircuts. A&W for the gift cards. There was a lot of them. Tootsie Clothing, Yanni Apparel. They all hooked us up. So just, you're right, give a shout out to them. Say thank you for helping us put this event on. And next year, when we do this again, I'm very excited. were already like kind of brainstorming stuff. There was things that like afterwards, like I thought of them, like, oh, I can't wait to do like add this next year. We're gonna be doing this. But like you said, for the shotgun tee time, I kind of want to touch on that just because it's interesting, because the guys who started on the second hole, they actually won. And the guys who started on the first hole, they're all friends of mine, they're members there. They went -1, so they that didn't really matter to them, right? Like they still struggled, and I'm pretty sure the guys that went to the playoff hole to start, I'm pretty sure their last hole was hole 15, so that means they would have started on hole 16. So it just goes to show, like, sometimes the course is designed, maybe to be a little bit easier in a certain part of the stretch. And the guys, I think, on the back nine that started on hole 16, like anybody that knows, hole 16, 17, and 18 might be three of the easiest and scoreable holes on the course. So those guys, I think, started out pretty hot. I know Jason Shellman's team with our buddy and Liam Bradley and Keeler, and I always forget the other guy's name, but I don't really know him too well, but anyways.
Liam Pellerin.
Yeah, Liam Pellerin. Yeah, he's a little bit younger than me. So, but anyways, they started out hot. They were minus, I think, 4 going into the back nine, and they ended up only finishing -5. So it just goes to show, like, sometimes you get a hot start in a scramble, you can cool off. Starting on a certain hole might help you out versus another one. So it was really interesting to see, and I think everybody was really receptive. There was only one group, and I'm not going to say who it was because they're our boys, but they got lost so many times, and every time I found them, I'd be like, man, you're over this way, or like you'd hear another team be like, no, hole such and such is that way. So just besides one team, everybody kind of knew the gist of it and got the swing of it, and it was a good time, man. It was a really good time. I'm really happy we did that for both of us. We stepped outside a little bit of our comfort zone. I think it's the first time either of us have put on an event to scale like that size with a golf tournament, and doing different things and kind of having different parts needing to like coincide and put things together. It was a fun time. And I think for our first event, like, it couldn't have went any better. Like, if you would have told me that's how it went, I would have said, damn, like, we had a perfect day. Like, it was a good time.
One thing I was surprised about too was, like, I know that like Instagram has obviously been our strong social media, so far, especially for like our age demographic in general, YouTube as well and stuff like that. And some people have listened to the podcast, and certain people just have their preferences. But this was like, I was surprised how many people, said like, yeah, I tuned into this episode or tuned into that, because I kind of went into the event like expecting people to just be there because of the tournament. You know what I mean? Like, be there but it was cool. Like, couple people I didn't really know too well being like, oh yeah, like, I've seen you guys on social media, I see what you guys are doing, and it helps keep you motivated, because like when you're spitting out videos and you're getting like 10, 15, 20 views, you're like, man, like, is anybody watching this? But then like that could be 10, 15 organic viewers every week, and that's actually building it up. That could be a couple new guys every week watching. So that was exciting. And like, one thing I wanted to say is that like what I learned through there is like just like meeting your audience a little bit, or like getting feedback on like the tournament or just like content and stuff, is like you realize that the reason why you're doing what you're doing is like for other people to like what you're doing. You know what I mean? Is like for people to like enjoy the content, or like if we start interviewing players, for people to like to be able to say like, hey, can you ask him this? Or like, if you have Willie Pavlov, can you ask him this question about this player? So like, it was kind of cool just to like meet some people that were, watching our stuff and supporting us.
Definitely. And just before we kind of get into the show, I for some reason I did it on the pick show. So I thought we did it here, but thanks to obviously Andrew for taking some pictures, and Noah Jones, who took a lot of pictures, and a lot of really, really, really good ones. A lot of ones that people that I've shown that weren't involved in the tournament were like, oh, like, that was a really nice picture, or like, who was that guy? So we really appreciate him, and just want to give a shout out to his podcast and a friend of ours, Quentin Parsons, Rap and OJ podcast. They cover all things music, hip hop, R&B, just the music scene in general, just kind of what's going on. And it's a really funny show. It's good vibes. You should definitely check them out. And I just wanted to say thanks to him, because there was some pictures, man, where I was like, damn, like,
yeah,
this guy, like, he came and helped us out. He didn't charge anything. Not that it matters, like, put our business out there, but it just shows what a good guy he is, that he wanted to just come do it based on, like, I feel like he kind of liked what we were doing on, like, we've both been kind of chatting back and forth with each other about each other's podcasts and like what we like about it. And we're friends with Quentin, and just, just being the solid dude he was, he just came out and he was like, yeah, man, I just kind of want to be here and just take some pictures. And if you guys just, put them anywhere, just give me a little shout out and we're good. And it was like, damn. And like the quality of pictures we got, it was definitely appreciated, buddy. So if you are watching, we just wanted to give you a quick shout out and say thank you for doing that for us.
Yeah, and he's also just a great guy. He's a Packers fan too, so I got to shut that out. But
he's a funny guy. I didn't know the jokes. The jokes came quick and fast, and they caught me off guard. I was like, "Oh shit! Like this guy's funny. All right, we got jokes."
Man, well, like, not to get too far into it, but like the camera that we got is mainly for like videography, like recording, and that's why we got like the viewfinder and stuff like that. Like his is clearly, the ones he had is clearly like for photography. Like his lens is like absolutely nuts. So I walked up to him and I was like, dude, like, it's weird for me. I was like, I'm not really a shy guy, but I'm getting like weird vibes, just like creeping on people. And he's like, oh man, it's the best. Like, check out this lens I have. And he's like a whole, pretty much on the next hole and getting a picture of the guys on the previous hole, like teeing it off with like perfect quality. And he's like, yeah, man, a lot of these guys don't even know until like the end that I'm taking pictures of them. And like, he would see them at like, on the green putting, and he's like, hey guys, like, just to let you know. And like, I was like, man, I'm so jealous because all of the pictures I got were like,
shout out the pooch.
We're right next to him. So, and there's the dog barking at the neighbors.
That's all right, man.
That's the cue to get into the podcast. But before we do that, let's give a shout out to Sports Interaction, because we're repping them, and we're going to talk a little bit of betting today. sportsinteraction.com/Mayflower Sports. And I gotta say, I wasn't huge about Sports Interaction as far as their football stuff like 4 or 5 years ago when I first got into betting. But I will say they've got lots of props now, Jake. They're good.
Yeah, we definitely had a look at those today on the before the show. Kind of where I would say predominantly got my odds from that. At least I was the ones I was saying to look for the picks I was giving out. Sports Interaction, and they were up early with which was cool. I know before, like a couple of years ago, like you said, they either didn't have them or they didn't come up till like Sunday, like 3 hours before the game. And you're like, well, fuck, like I like to get my picks in, sometimes a little bit early, especially on stuff with odds and value and players, certain things. And today when I went up, I was surprised they had pretty much everything I was looking for. And I was like, all right, that's cool. And really good prices too. Like, found Kyle Pitts there anytime. It was plus 145, I think it was. And, a lot of places it was coming in at plus 115 or plus 110 or different things like that. So Sports Interactions are really easy book to use, really reliable, quick to put your money on, easy to take your money off. Obviously, you have to be 18 plus to gamble.
Yeah,
that's a big one. And make sure you gamble responsibly, because obviously anything that you bet, you can lose. And we don't want you guys mortgaging the house on, Kyle Pitts anytime in a game in London. Like, there's smarter investments than that. But this is like Sports Interaction. Like I said, use what you can to afford to lose. Come follow us. We're going to have more bets going out from now on. We're going to have more picks going on. We're going to have a new segment coming on where we're going to take some of your guys' bets and we're going to talk about them on the show. We're going to gather them throughout the week. We're going to probably get your locks of the week or whatever for the NFL and just kind of talk about what you guys might see and why you think that they're a lock of the week. So make sure you check out Sports Interaction. 125% bonus deposit up to $100. It's free money. Don't know why you wouldn't get it. It's like I said, it's free money. Go get it.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to talk about your show a little bit more that you're doing every Friday, but I do want to say though about the content that we're going to be doing with other people. We're going to start tweeting out earlier and putting on Instagram and all of our social medias, maybe even make a YouTube video about it, getting people to let us know their action, what they're liking. And it's always a cool thing to get, especially from people you might not know, because your buddies' tendencies a little bit, what they like to bet, which teams they like to bet, sides, totals, unders, overs.
Definitely.
But so it's kind of fun to make a little book it or bet it segment where Jake and I decide like we'd want to take your action or we'd want to bet it with you. And it's going to be kind of funny, like non-biased. We don't care who it is. If you're a good friend of ours or somebody we have no idea who they are, we'll tell you out of our heads if we think that we should bet it with you or if we'll book your action. And not that we're actually going to do that. Maybe I will if I really hate your pick. But
maybe if we don't like it, maybe
someone makes a just disastrous pick. I'm like, all right, I'll be your bookie.
You bet against the Eagles, I'm gonna be in your comments.
So
don't do it.
I'll be the bookie if you're fading the Packers.
Yeah, but let's jump into the NFL, man. I feel like we haven't had a chance to talk that in a really long time. There's been a lot of stuff going on, a lot of teams looking good, a lot of teams looking absolutely abysmal. Some teams, some players that have kind of taken a leap, kind of some players that have taken a step back. So just off the gate, like, what are your first thoughts of the NFL season through the first 5 weeks? I think we've had some pretty outstanding performances, games, just different things going on. Just kind of your first thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, as you know, like a lot of times I'm obviously following the NFL from like a fan standpoint, but I'm following it from like a betting standpoint and teams that are, covering the spread and stuff like that. And I feel like what that helps me with is knowing really which teams are meeting their expectations, right? And looking at a team like the Chiefs, dating back to last year, even all the way up until the big game, they still only have one cover. They've only covered the point spread like one time or two times in their last 13 games. I mean, that just goes to show this is a team that I know we're talking about results, but that continues to be a little bit overrated. I'm curious what's going to happen this week's game. But looking at them, I just feel like it looks really competitive, man.
Can I ask you a question just before you move on? Because I know I'm going to forget it. And I think it lends pretty well to the topic. Like, you're in the field, right? So you're paying attention to lines. You definitely know kind of like what Vegas is thinking, like what the sharp money, the public, like you kind of have an understanding of the overall, like I'll call it like the ecosystem of like actually how to gamble. Like there's a way to gamble. There's like a philosophy. There's reasons that lines are a certain way, and there's ways to do your lines versus Vegas.
Oh, I think I know what your question is going to be.
So do you think that because the Chiefs are so good and they win so many games and that they have such a high-powered offense that Vegas always wants to cover themselves on like the high point spreads? Like they're almost daring you to take, that 12.5 or 13 or like, you know what I mean? Or those 10.5s against teams that are like, they're pretty good football teams. And like, we just have been like kind of painted this picture that like, oh, the Chiefs have the best offense, so therefore they're just unbeatable and they're just going to score 50 points every game. And it kind of hasn't been that through the first 4 weeks. And I just like, it blends into, like you said, like the week, like going back 13 weeks, it's been 2 out of the last 13 weeks. Like, do you think that Vegas is kind of putting those lines almost too high to just make sure that they're not losing mass amount of monies on people taking the Chiefs to cover the spread?
Definitely, 100%. Like, obviously, comparing, like, if you look at the NFL compared to like MLB or the NHL, those sports are money line sports. So when the odds makers make those odds, it's a little bit different than point spreads because obviously favorites are going to win, and it's hard to really avoid that. So they have to juice up the money line odds. But with NFL, every point spread is minus 110 odds. So you're pretty much, like you said, they're making those odds as far as they think people will go. But I think a big misunderstanding people have about point spreads in Vegas is that they actually want action on both sides. That's their that when you see line movement taking place throughout a week, it's because they're, like you said, like they're getting so hammered on one side. They're trying to level it up so much and move that number up so much that there's the term buyback. So people so the sharp players, it's kind of like when you see an over, open up at 51 and it gets bumped up all the way to like 54. Like even last night's game with the Seahawks and the Rams. And then we see the buyback, the sharps come pouring in now on the under because they're betting on, numbers, not teams, which is kind of a cliche saying in the industry. So I definitely agree with you. I think it's like something that a lot of people try and look for, especially in point spread sports. It's hard to really do it with money line sports, but with point spread sports like that, teams will, think about how many people in Halifax, even, I know this isn't Vegas and stuff like that, but imagine how many people Sunday morning at like 11 a.m. and like all age groups just go to their local convenience store, log on to the ProLine app or just get one of the little ProLine slips. And they're like, oh, the Chiefs are playing this team minus 6.5 all day. You know what I mean? Like how many people will just like, and one thing I've learned is that sometimes kind of like what you said, people just don't really care. Like that number could be 7.5 or it could be 6.5. And we all know the key number is 6.5 with the touchdown. And people just
Football
don't,
numbers,
they don't care. Like people just literally don't. So it's a really good point. And I think that it's the same reason as a lot of people that I know, they make the most money betting on like crappy teams. Like a lot of teams that are like pretty shitty are covering point spreads, and it's interesting that way. So yeah, I'm with you. Who's been the team that's like, I'm curious for you, that's like let you down the most, or not you personally, but like kind of shocked you the most?
I think there's a couple different teams like that I think you could definitely go either side, like most surprising or like more surprising than you initially thought, or more disappointing than you initially thought. But most disappointing, I feel like that's kind of a tough question. Like I feel like a lot of people had expectation for the Steelers. The Steelers haven't really looked, too Scotty Too Hotty. If anybody knows, shout out WWF, WWE fans out there. Scotty Too Hotty was the man, but they're not looking Scotty Too Hotty. Also, I felt like the Eagles might have been a little bit better, but that's just kind of me being biased. I thought our front four and our offense might be able to carry us a little bit more than we have, but we've kind of looked like a team that's probably going to score anywhere from like 17 to 30 points in a game, and it can be very ugly at times. I think Minnesota has been another team that I thought was going to maybe make the step. I think they have one of the best front fours in the NFL. They've been a little subpar. And I think obviously an easy one to kind of to point at, or two easy ones to kind of point at, would be the Saints and the Tennessee Titans. Both teams have not started out hot. Teams that historically are playoff teams in the NFL over the last, 5 years. Teams that kind of like make runs, or they make pushes to they might not get to the NFL or the championship game, but they're making runs into the playoffs. They're doing their damage. So I think those are just a couple teams off the top of my head that I would say have been, pretty subpar to start the year so far.
I'm right there with you on the Titans, man. Like their defense is horrible. It's like they just get walked all over. They're the kind of team that you just like deep into the season don't want to be getting behind and don't really expect much of them. And you know what I mean? Like, and the funny thing is they have like such a crazy running back, and yet a lot of times they can't even use him because they're down in games, or they're competing in games that are like first to 30 wins. And we know how much of a beast Henry is, but and he's going to put up those numbers, but like he's not a wide receiver that can like, make a game changing like 60-yard catch. Like he can gradually throw out of a game. You know what I mean? Like put up some huge numbers, but like, that's the thing about running backs, right? And so I think, the AFC South, people used to always laugh and say, the AFC least, you know what I mean? There are people are the NFC least, but let's look at the AFC South: Titans, Texans, Colts, Jags. I mean, what are the tickets going for in that division right now?
That was the worst division in football for the longest time, and it's just circling the bandwagon. It came back. Obviously, the Jags are a friggin' mess, absolute mess. Shout out our boy Harry, Octagon Thoughts. He's a rider for that team. He will die with that team no matter what's going on. But my God, that would be the most insufferable team to cheer for right now. Like they can't get anything right. Indianapolis is looking like I don't know, man. Indianapolis, I thought they had a really good defense. I thought their secondary was kind of suspect. Like not suspect, but there was at points last year it was there to get got, and ultimately it did. That's why they didn't advance in the playoffs. But I feel like this year, just overall, the defense has been pretty disappointing. I think Carson Wentz has kind of let them down a little bit with the injuries. Something that me as a Philadelphia Eagles fan knows all about. The Titans, thinking back, and I kind of want to get your opinion on this because it just kind of popped into my mind right now as you were kind of talking about the Titans. Thinking back to last year, so as someone that had AJ Brown in both my fantasy leagues last year, and obviously it's fantasy football, it doesn't matter. But just thinking back last year about how many games AJ Brown missed here or there, it was a couple. It wasn't too many that it was like, this guy's never healthy, but he did miss a couple games here or there. This year, they bring in Julio Jones via trade, a guy notoriously known for missing games here or there. or not playing at 100% health. And same with AJ Brown multiple times last year, wasn't playing at 100% health. Now those are your two number one receivers, and you don't have them for a specific game, even though it's the Jets. Like, that's a problem. And I feel like that's something that also needs to be addressed with Tennessee, is that they basically put all their chips in on an offense with two guys throwing the ball, at least, that historically can't really stay healthy. And I know their defense is suspect as all hell, but the offense hasn't helped them out. The offensive line hasn't helped them out. Taylor Lewan, coming off a knee injury, has just got absolutely abused this year, and he's one of the NFL's best offensive linemen. He's just getting absolutely abused this year. Like, do you think that there's a bigger problem in Tennessee right now besides the defense? Like, that the fact that they're trusting their entire passing game in two guys that are known to miss games?
Definitely. And I don't really think that's like anything, personal against those guys or saying anything bad about them. And like, you bring up fantasy, but let's be honest, like, fantasy helps us like stay on tabs with that kind of stuff. And if they were on your team, definitely you're going to know about them probably more than anybody, because you're pissed or you're happy or like, you know what I mean?
Like, about them a lot more, I find.
Yeah, definitely. And like you can hear people like it's so funny hearing people like get upset about something in a game that some like a team could play super well and like win 24 whatever, and if some guy doesn't get enough yards for your fantasy team, you're like, he had a bad game.
He's a bum.
But the average analyst is like, dude, he played all right. Like, they won the game. You know what I mean? But no, I'm with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I also do think like the contrarian opinion to that would be just like, you're putting a lot of the pressure adds to those guys when you're allowing as many points as they are per game. You know what I mean? Like, there's not one game on their schedule, or at least maybe not more than two, where I'm going to be like, you know what, they're going to lock things down. And it's not just us either, man. Like, every single person is talking about it. It's obviously not really a hot take that we're putting forward, but two teams that I'm interested in seeing something out of this week, in week 5. It is, week 5.
Yep.
Bengals and Browns. So
my guy took it. Dude, I could feel it coming out of your brain. I knew we were going to talk about and we didn't talk about anything that we were going to talk about.
No.
For the show. I'm happy you brought up the Bengals. Let's hear it, bro. I got a lot of opinions on the Bengals.
Well, first of all, they're playing my team, which is like, I hate going on shows and talking about the Packers, because like, just like with the Habs, just like with even the Jays and Raps, like, I don't really bet them much. Like, I don't even like to like throw out opinions on them, because it's so refreshing to just watch a team you're cheering on. But I think this game against the Packers is going to be super close. Like, I think that the Bengals have a wide receiving core, like, no pun intended. They have a lot of people. They're deep. Like, they've got a lot of guys. And I'm not even like Joe Mixon, got him on my fantasy team. Kind of disappointed that he's, had a little knock, but they've got some pretty decent depth from what it looks like at the running back position. Now it's kind of like hey, like, what do you guys have for me this week? Like, what can they do? Joe Burrows, he's a bad man. He got injured. I think he can throw the ball. I'm curious to see what they'll do against the Packers, against some big boy competition, and against a Packers team that, let's be honest, their defense has gotten exposed in some games. Like, if you have multiple receivers, and some guys that can run out the backfield, they can get exposed. So between the Bengals, that's a big game for me as far as learning goes. And then the Browns against the Chargers. And shout out to Eli, a hardcore Browns fan. I'm really interested in seeing what goes on with the Browns this week, because I think they might win that game. And I think a lot of it has to do, I think, first of all, defense wins championships is the old-fashioned saying. And I actually like their defense. But, man, when you've got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, that like 1-2 punch, I always say, plus you've got some great receivers, the only thing stopping them is a Baker Mayfield dud every couple weeks. Seriously, like, because sometimes he looks like a beast and sometimes he has a couple drop-offs, but they're playing the Chargers. Chargers beat the Chiefs a few weeks back, but like I kind of said out the gate, like, I think that the Chiefs, people are starting to figure them out. Like, and it's not just me saying it. People are literally starting to figure the Chiefs out. They know what they do. They know what plays they run. Mahomes isn't as like crazy as he used to be. He's obviously a great QB, but I think it's a big game for both those two teams, at least for me, as far as my learning. See what the Bengals can do against the Packers and see what the Browns can do against the Chargers.
Yeah, I like both of those. I like both of those games. The Bengals, for me, might be the worst 3-1 team in the league. I know Joey Burrow is a fan favorite.
So you're against me. You're against my opinion. You don't think
I'm not against it at all. I just don't like the Bengals. Like, it's the Bengals. And I know Joe Burrow's job is to kind of go in there and change that and kind of fix the perception of the team and kind of just alter what people think of that franchise. But for me, I'm not uber convinced. Like, the offense has looked good at times, but through the 4 weeks, there has been, a game or two there where they haven't looked that good. And there's been stretches in games where they've looked pretty bad at times as well. And I just, the defense is what the defense is. It's okay. They got a decent front four, but other than that, like, it is what it is. I think they could win this week. That's not what I'm saying. I just down the road, like, I know the division right now is a little bit up in the air with like the Browns and then the Steelers kind of falling off. And then now you have like the Bengals kind of coming up out of nowhere. I want to see them come week 10, week 11. I don't see them making the playoffs. And if they do, I'll eat my words. I like Joe Burrow. Like you said, I like the offense. The offensive line's still a little bit suspect. They've done a better job this year of protecting Joe, but I'm just not sold on the Bengals. I think.
Well, let me ask you this: how much of a you can play who you're in front of or who goes in front of you type of guy, or are you, or how much of a they've only played this team kind of guy are you? Because I've actually kind of flipped my script. Like, I used to be a man, like, they've only played the Jags or they've only played the Steelers, but like past year and a bit, I've turned into like, well, they played who they had to play and they beat them. Where are you in that stance?
I definitely feel like the NFL is one of those sports where anybody can beat anybody on any given week. So you have to do it like game by game. You can't just say like, oh, well, they only played X, Y, and Z. It's like, well, they still won those games. They still had to show up and play, and like things had to go correct or them do certain things well to at least win the game. Like, you don't just like show up and they're like, all right, well, you look like the better team, so you're going to win.
Yeah.
It's like, you still got to play the game. So I'm definitely with that for the.
I think we might have just lost Jake for a second. Jake just timed out on us real quick. He'll be back in a second. We'll have him right back on the show here in just a second. Here he is. He's popping right back in.
Geesh, I'm having troubles with the Wi-Fi today. I was telling you earlier with the gambling videos, there was a couple lags. That one hit me with a lag and a boot. But just with like the Bengals, man, it's just like I was saying, they did play who they played. They were playing who they were playing. They did win those games that they've won. It's just like I wasn't uber convinced by anything they've done so far this season, and I just want to see them come later in the season. And then, like you said, with the Browns and the Chargers game, I think that's game of the week for most people. I think that's easily I would say that's probably I would say right now up until week 5, this is probably one of the games of the season we'll see going down later in the line. I feel like the Browns have played pretty well. Like you said, Baker's been kind of suspect. Starting the year, the Chargers were a little suspect, and then they kind of turned it around, and they've looked actually really good as of late. Herbert's starting to click a little bit more with his wide receivers. Mike Williams is looking like an absolute stud. Shout out Dusty Abdul, our boy.
I think he's listening right now too on Facebook.
He picked Mike Williams, man. He said at the draft, he was like, the boy's going to be ready to go this season. And I was like, oh, okay, have fun. And sure enough, my guys out here eating. So it's been an interesting season for both those teams. I think, like you said, it depends what Baker shows up, because we know that the Chargers defense does have a really good front four. They do have Derwin James and Casey Hayward in the secondary. So they have really good players that can make plays. Obviously, they got Bosa. So Melvin Ingram, like, they got a bunch of beasts on defense. It's just how Baker's going to cope. And I think, like you said, with Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, they need to control the game. They need to eat the clock. They can't let Herbert have multiple possessions and like elongated drives where they get to eat the clock up. Because I think as much as Baker doesn't want to admit to the fact that he probably is a game manager, I think that's what he is he is a game manager. And I feel like anytime the Browns get behind 2 scores or, like 3 scores, it's going to be tough for them to come back. So they just need to get out, run the ball, not turn it over, wear that defense down, and don't let Herbert get the ball. And I think they have a really good shot to win. But if Herbert has a chance to control the pace of the game, he gets to, get Eckler involved, get that play action going, looking for Mike Williams, looking for Keenan Allen. I think it could be a long day for the Browns.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about these big games is like, as much as I say to you that I think that it's about who you're playing, who you're playing, and the schedule is what it is. These games do like obviously show us something. Like I don't consider each loss a loss, if that makes any sense. Like I still do take into account who you've defeated and who you've lost to. It's more so just like I don't discount teams if they have a 3-1 record or 4-1 record if they only played crappy teams. Like, what do you want them to do? Put up 20 more points just to prove to you they're better? And like a lot of people don't think about like game scripts either, or like coaching theories or ethics. Like if you notice, like some coaches, like if they're up like even like 2 scores, like they're instantly running the ball like every play. Like they're running short slant. Like it's not college where like they're like, yeah, like we want to run the score up. You know what I mean? So like sometimes, I think back to that game. What was it? That might have been the first game of the year. Yeah, first game of the year. What was it? Rams at Lions. Rams in Detroit. And you look at that game, and Detroit was getting absolutely dominated the entire game. First half, a little bit of the third quarter. But if you look at that fourth quarter and the tail end of that third quarter in week 1, Lions and Rams, the Lions were able to put up points because the Rams took their foot off the gas pedal. They literally didn't care. Like they stopped playing defense. They lost all motivation. And, that's something people are going to say, especially in my business. They're going to say like, oh, like, I don't think the Rams defense is that good because look at what the Lions did in the second half. It's like, dude, they just didn't give a fuck. And like, that looks bad on the coaching staff a little bit for not keeping them motivated. But let's be honest, like sometimes the scoreline doesn't always, read what actually happened in the game. You know what I mean? Like that game was an absolute domination. But if you look at the scoreboard, you actually might be impressed by kind of what the Lions were able to do.
Yeah, definitely. And just before, I think we've kind of talked about the NFL long enough here. Just before we move on, what do you think? Or I'll say, who's been your most surprising team? I guess I guess I can go with mine first since I'm already talking here. I would have to say the Carolina Panthers. I really liked what they've done this year. I like the way the defense has kind of come together. I like the way that Coach Rules kind of got those guys playing together. And I feel like although they lost McCaffrey, it's almost been a blessing in disguise because they got to see how good DJ Moore is. They've used DJ Moore so well this year. They've been using him out of the backfield when McCaffrey's not around. And I just love the amount of I just love the confidence that the coaching staff has put into Sam Darnold to be like, all right, like we know you're good. We know that situation was absolutely horrendous and no QB would survive there, especially a rookie one. So we're going to give you full reign to show us. We're not going to hold you back. We're going to let you throw the ball. We're going to let you throw the ball, 30 plus times a game, and let's see what happens. And he leads the NFL in rushing TDs right now. How crazy is that? Not among QBs in the NFL. He leads the league in rushing TDs. Sam's became a completely different player under them. I love what they got going on. They're playing my Eagles this week. I think that's a tough game for both sides, and I think if the Panthers show me a convincing performance against my team, which I think they're probably going to, I think I'm pretty bought in on them for doing some damage the rest of the season and having a really good shot to be a playoff team and maybe make some noise.
Yeah, they're great, and I think it's such a funny example. I wish we talked about this before, or even like when the season started a little bit earlier. But like, it's such a good example, man, of like what happens when somebody leaves a bad team.
Yeah.
Like it's such a good example of it, and it's so funny because people are talking about it already. With Wilson in New York, he just had his best game last week, but with them. But like imagine the feeling that Darnold has right now when he wakes up in the morning. He's like, I'm not a Jet. You know what I mean? Like I'd be thinking the same way. Like, thank God I'm not a New York Jet. He's actually on a winning team, like winning culture. Who's my team? You know what? I'm gonna say we're talking about Vegas, talking about some picks. I'm gonna say the Vegas Raiders. I talk some shit to them. I don't know if you heard me talking any shit about them, but I talk some smack about them. And I think I talked with you about how I thought that just like home field advantage has gone down. Like people thought it would be a huge deal with like the fact that there were no fans, and I was like, nah, it won't be. Just like with the Golden Knights, man, we're seeing some good home field advantage for the Vegas Golden Knights. And one thing that's kind of funny is people always talk about this with the Golden Knights. There's going to be a lot of fans for other teams at Raiders because obviously it's a huge tourist destination, right? But Seahawks, Rams, 49ers, that game was a blowout, but Ravens 33-27. They beat the Steelers. They beat Dolphins. I mean, this is a team that even dating back to the preseason, they've impressed me. And like the reason why I bring up the preseason is because they cared. And, they actually, like, I could tell, like, even their home games, they were caring for their fans. They wanted to, but the amount of targets Waller's getting and stuff like that, like, it's a matter of if they can really kind of like mix up their playbook and stuff like that. One team I wanted to talk about just real quick before we move on is the Broncos. And it's not a positive talk. So they're 3-1, and you're talking about a team that's 3-1 in the Bengals. This is a Denver Broncos team that started off September playing the Giants, Jags, Jets. I think me, you, Will, and Eli and Abdul can beat the Giants, Jags, and the Jets. You know what I mean? So like everyone's like, and everyone that I know in the betting world too and good for them because we were getting pretty good spreads on the Broncos, surprisingly. But this set up to be a really, really good spot for the Ravens as far as the point spread go. Every sharp bettor I knew was on the Ravens in that matchup. It was pretty much a pick 'em price, even odds, and they lost 23-27. You play like three of the shittiest teams and to start off your season, and then you play the Ravens, and there's a lot of look-ahead lines. Before the season starts, point spreads are created for every single game. It's going to happen in the entire NFL year. And I can guarantee you the spreads were not the exact same pre-season as they were as far as pick'em goes against the Ravens. So to me, the Broncos are a little bit overrated, and they're going to get a little check down to reality. So I want to give a little rant about the Broncos. Everyone seems to love them, but they've played nobody. And again, good for them for getting wins. I'm not taking it away from them, but it was such a picture perfect thing to happen. The Ravens go ahead and say like, hey man, like this is what a good team is like. So that's just my thoughts on the Broncos.
So you're fading this week accordingly. No Broncos bets will be had for Skinny this week. That's basically what I took from this. From here on out, my guy's probably not taking the Broncos.
Yeah, and I was lucky to get on them early in the season, but that Ravens game should have taught a lot of people. And definitely. I think some people, Jake, too, the funny thing is thought they were clever being like, the Broncos are changed and took them against the Ravens.
Yeah. You got to believe in what you believe in, man. Some people thought they were going to change, and we got the same old Broncos we got the last couple of years. But let's jump into the MLB here, buddy. Let's give a quick hitter on this because I do want to talk about the next topic. Just what have you made so far? Obviously, the season was a long grind. We haven't really talked baseball too much. Like we prefaced when we were talking about baseball is that it's really easy to get caught up in the middle of the season and just doesn't hit the same like the beginning of the season and the end of the season does. It's very hard to be attentive for the whole 162 games. And here we are. We're in the playoffs, man. It's October. We had the Boston Red Sox upset. Well, I wouldn't say upset, but according to some of the books, upset the Yankees. And then we had a crazy game with the Dodgers and the Cardinals. Just what have you made so far? We have the Astros playing the White Sox right now. They're up 2-1 in the game. They're up 1-0 in the series. We also have Milwaukee and Atlanta kicking off today at 5:35 our time. And then we also have the Dodgers and San Francisco kicking off tonight. A little surprised with San Francisco making the playoffs. I'm not going to lie. They had a pretty good season, but going into the season, not a team that was on my radar, buddy.
Yeah, they impressed a lot. I mean, think about this. The Dodgers were in a wild card game.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like what?
It's almost as shocking as looking at the Jays not making the wild card game. They were plus 60 runs on the Red Sox on the season. Red Sox and Yankees, they're plus 60. They had more than 60 run differential in both those teams, and didn't make the wild card game. Just goes to show you got to win the games against shitty teams. Like the Blue Jays lost too many games against the Orioles and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess I'll start with the team we were just talking about, man. The Giants and the Dodgers. I mean, I'll say one thing. That game against the Cardinals was very predictable. I knew it was going to be a sweat. I had a feeling the Dodgers might pull it out, but Cardinals breaking the record for what he had 17 straight victories for them. A lot of momentum for them going into that wild card game, and they couldn't get it done. But I don't know. The Dodgers just have such a deep lineup, and like one thing about them, my biggest thing that I probably annoy people with talking about most sports is depth. But my biggest thing I talk about in the MLB, Jake, and you and I don't really talk a lot of baseball together, is like the ability to score, like just to get on base. Like I'm a big Moneyball mentality kind of guy. Like get on base, get singles, and I think that's what they can do that a lot of people won't give them credit for. Like they're a huge home running hitting team for sure, but when it matters, they'll hit you a single, and their players know how to adjust. They won't always swing for the fences, and I feel like that's what makes them impressive. That's one of the reasons why I like the Red Sox. I think that's one of the reasons why they're strong, but the Astros are too strong for them. Milwaukee, Atlanta is going to be a real good series, man. But everyone's pumped for the San Fran and LA Dodgers rivalry. But no, looking forward to it, man. It's going to be a really good playoffs. And like you said, long season. Last year had the shortened COVID season. This year, 162 games. So I don't blame you for what you said. You know, it's hard to stay engaged. For me as well, you know, it's hard to stay engaged throughout the whole entirety of it. But once it gets down to the wild card hunt and the playoffs and stuff like that, I'm definitely back engaged again and looking forward to it. And I think it's kind of cool. One thing that's kind of random, Jake, to throw back to you. I think it's kind of cool how every MLB park is different. I've always thought that since I started watching baseball. You watched the Red Sox game yesterday, and you realized that. And I was against them. And you realize that, or I had the under, and you realize that some of these plays that are happening at other fields wouldn't be home runs if it was in Boston at Fenway. What do they call it? The Green Monster, the Green Ball, the Green. Sometimes I call it the Green Machine. I don't know why. It's from like a movie or something. But
the Green Machine is a movie.
Yeah. But you know what I mean, though? Like it's crazy. Yeah. Like some of the home runs that were hit yesterday in the Tampa Bay game wouldn't have gone out. They would not have gone out of the park at Fenway at all. So that's one thing I find cool about baseball, but it kind of pisses me off because I watch one home run hit and I'm like, oh, that wouldn't have been a home run anywhere else. You know, that's why the whole Coors Field thing is a huge deal.
Yeah, and I think that's what plays even more into like the home field advantage aspect of baseball is your park is your park and it's uniquely designed to be your park. And like something that we don't think about too is like where some of these places are built. So like, is it, you know, a little bit further away from the city where there's less buildings around and more wind, like, you know what I mean, is circulating in the air, or is it built like right in the heart of like downtown or near downtown? You get all these skyscrapers around and it kind of like shields the stadium in a little bit. There's a lot that goes into the MLB parks. And like, that's a pretty interesting point that you brought up there that I think a lot of people do specifically tend to talk about sometimes with the Red Sox is, oh, that wouldn't have been a home run at Fenway, or that would have been a home run at Fenway. You know what I mean? That's it's just one of those parks where it's so iconically built, and the variance from right field to left field in distance for home runs, like from pole to pole, is so different that it's just an easy park to compare to, right? But I'm excited, like you said. I'm really intrigued for all the series, obviously, but specifically teams, like you said, the Giants. I'm really excited to see what they got going on. They're playing the Dodgers. The Dodgers have so much experience. It seems like they're there every year, whether they win or lose. They're always in the mix. So I think that's a really, really tough matchup for them. But they've had a really good bullpen this year, I think. So I think when it comes to playoffs with the Giants, they have I would say they have not as big of bats, but they do similarly have some bats that can compete with the Dodgers. So I don't think like they're completely outruled there or outgunned. And I think it's going to come down to the pitching. And like, it's pretty cliche to say for baseball, but specifically the bullpen pitching, because big thing with you, and this is something like I always tell people now that when I talk to them that bet baseball, I don't bet baseball just because it's so unpredictable, but you're a big first 5 innings guy because that one pitcher for the most part is in control of those 5 innings. When you're betting whole games, you're relying on other people coming into the game and doing their job. And I think in playoff baseball, that's something that gets overlooked a lot is the gamesmanship of the bullpen, how to work your bullpen, how to use your bullpen, when to call certain guys in. Like, there's a lot of times where people will go crazy. It's like the 6th inning and the guy's giving up no runs and the manager's pulling them out. And they're like, why? Well, it's like, because there's a gamesmanship, there's a tactic that goes into this. Like, that's what I love playoff baseball the most for, is you actually start to see a little bit more of the gamesmanship. And there's not so many games going on. So the best of the best are pointing out the gamesmanships and the different tactics and things that are going on. So for me, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the Giants use their bullpen to kind of counteract those big bats of the Dodgers. And if their starting pitching, say, can't make it, to the 6th, 7th inning, and they're making it mostly to 4th and 5th inning, how their bullpen is able to counteract the Dodgers lineup. And the other team I'm actually really interested in, and I'm interested every time they make the playoffs, because I don't understand how they make the playoffs every year, is the Tampa Bay Rays. Like, when they get a team,
just the reason you just said, though, pitching, really.
Yeah. And it's just so crazy to me that, like, they don't have any fans. Nobody cares about them. Like, realistically, they have one of the smaller payrolls in the MLB. And specifically in that division, they have maybe Baltimore might have a smaller payroll, but out of like the Yankees and those guys and the Red Sox and the Blue Jays, like, their payroll stomps the Rays out. It squishes it. It's not even close. And somehow every couple years they're able to put like a stretch together where it's like 3-4 years where they're just competitive every year. And it's so impressive to me that they were able to do it again this year with the Red Sox going out and making trades at the deadline, and same with the Yankees bringing in big names. And Tampa was just able to kind of like steady the course and win the division, like not just make the playoffs, but they won the division with 3 other teams in that division that were studs. And that, like, we're talking about the Blue Jays not making the playoffs, but you know what I mean? Like, that's crazy that division was that good and they were able to top that division with those 3 teams spending more than them on their lineups and stuff. So for me, I don't like the Red Sox, so I hope the Rays beat the Red Sox. And for me, those are the 2 teams I really am interested in watching, and I hope one of them makes a run. I think that'd be really cool to see 2 teams that maybe even in their own division weren't expected to be as good as they were and go make a run. And I think that's the beautiful thing about baseball is, although you might be the best team, you're not given any wins. And come playoff time, we do see giants fall, and we do see Cinderella stories, and we do see upsets, and we do see comebacks. And I think that's the beautiful thing about the baseball playoffs is it's so unpredictable, and every inning matters. In the regular season, some teams might not take every inning as seriously or every game as seriously, but when it comes time to the playoffs, you can see each team is locked in from the first pitch to the very last.
Yeah. That's what makes it exciting. Like, it's true. Like, guys are eating popcorn, they're doing this on the bench, they're talking to each other, they're dancing, they're joking around, because it's 162 games. Like, that's why I feel like there's no manager bitching at them for like goofing around. Like, obviously when you're on deck and stuff like that and you're out in the field, but like, it's true. Like, yeah. And just to mention about the Rays, my laptop died, so I'm just looking down on my phone right now. So I'm looking down, but Rays 5-0 yesterday against the Red Sox. And what I thought was interesting about that is, like, everybody likes to bash on Garrett Cole for the Yankees, and I bet against the Yankees in the wild card game, the bats were going for the Red Sox. I mean, they looked like they weren't going up against an ace at all whatsoever. You know what I mean? And then last night they can't get anything going. I mean, they get guys on base. Actually, I got to correct myself. They got guys on base. They couldn't bring anybody in. And that's just what it goes to show. And then when the time comes, because a lot of teams, they want to stretch out their starter as long as they want, as long as they can. But like you said, when the time comes, they have the ability to bring in their bullpen. They have they've had a top 5 bullpen for the past 3 years. And that's what's so cool with them is that if you're the Red Sox, you have to almost get to the Rays early. You don't even want to wait until later in the game to get to them because their bullpen is going to shut you down. So I thought that was kind of cool because teams have talked about that with the Red Sox not having the best bullpen. And now it's pretty much like if you're taking them, you got to hope they have a couple runs early on because 5-0 start are you a big momentum guy too, as far as the wild card goes? Like, do you think, because a lot of people are like, yeah, man, the Red Sox are going to be feeling it after their win. And I always think it's ridiculous how much celebrating goes into like winning a wild card game, but I get it because it's 100. Like I keep saying, how many games there are. But I mean, the Dodgers, who won the World Series last year, were literally popping champagne and had like the the snow. What's it called? The masks on. You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like the
the
ski.
ski
Yeah,
goggles.
yeah,
Yeah,
seagull. It's like, dude, like you won the wild card game. I don't understand. Like you have to play in 2 days. Why are you getting drunk?
yeah. I think it can have an impact. I think it has had an impact in before. Obviously, off the top of my head, I can't just this team won the wild card and this team won. But I think it can have a factor. I just think too, like in baseball with the playoffs, it's so matchup based. Like it's such like it's one of those sports where like you could be the best team and just this one team that maybe is middle of the pack, they just match up so well with you. Maybe like they have a lot of like left-handed relief pitchers and you have a lot of left-handed bats. And it just works out that way that they have really good left-handers and you have really good left-handed batters and they're able to neutralize you and they play you tough every year. I think the playoffs in the MLB, that's something that gets overlooked is someone like the Rays who has an excellent bullpen and has a really good pitching staff, just starting pitching wise, that the Red Sox do have to get after them early.
Yeah.
And in baseball, especially in the playoffs, like, yeah, there are runs scored early because, people are tight, especially like pitchers and stuff like that. Like they're not trying to make any mistakes off the get-go. And sometimes that leads to mistakes. I feel like you're not going to get the Rays early. Like you're just not going to get them early the way it's set up. Or if you are going to get them early, it's not going to be like 3 games to win you this first round.
Yeah. You talking about how exciting playoff baseball is. The Red Sox are going to have to win like 3-1 if they're going to win a game in that series.
But like that's the part of the atmosphere that I love so much about baseball that makes the playoffs for me. Like it's one of the most enjoyable playoffs for me. Like I'm not going to sit here and say it's better than like, the Super Bowl or anything like that. But I thoroughly enjoy MLB playoffs. I think the atmosphere with the benches, the players, the managers, the tactics, the fans, just everything that goes into the MLB playoffs that, it's a summer sport. It's October now. It's getting chilly out there. Like you're really out there battling at like now, like you had 162 games to play. You're all playing for the same thing. And it really comes down to just the tactics and the nuances of the game and who's able to execute better. And I think baseball gets a bad rap for being boring, but it's just long. It's just one of those things where it's so long that it's hard to pay attention for 162 games. That sometimes when you leave and come back, like someone like me, like I'm amped for playoffs because I was watching the MLB for the first like 2.5 months of the season, like every day, keeping up tabs on everybody, watching who's doing what. And now like you get like kind of like 5-6 months into the season, you're like, I'm waiting for playoffs.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. But
and you know what's funny, Jake? People's like the people that are old fashioned, they don't even want to slow or to speed the game up.
No,
that's what I love about
nobody
it. Like,
wants to change anything, man.
Yeah, and I actually respect that. I like that because like I there's some people that were complaining the other day that I work with like about the game, how long it takes. I know a guy that it bugs me hearing this, but it's probably just because I've never been to that many. I've been to some professional sporting events, but this guy's got like third base, like couple rows up, and he's literally genuinely saying like he had a bad time. He's like, yeah, it was a boring game. Like there weren't that many runs. You know what I mean? You know what I'd give to go to a 2-1 Jays game, like with like 3 games left in the regular season. You know what I mean? Yeah. This guy's like got free tickets.
A strap in Halifax for Moosehead tickets. Yeah, like amateur hockey, bro. So just like we would be up on anything.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
How bad they were.
And a lot of people are like, no, like I grew up watching baseball. Like baseball is my sport. Like I like it the way it is. They have no problem with sitting down for 4.5 hours and watching it. But I got to say, before we move on to the next topic, I literally saw someone talking on a podcast earlier today. And somebody asked them like, hey, like, so tell us what it was like. They were at Dodger Stadium for the game. And the guy was literally like, man, it's the same thing you were just saying. The way that like the atmosphere changes for the playoffs. He said people were like celebrating like foul ticks. He said people were celebrating like bunts down the line. Like everything was getting celebrated like it was a home run out the park to the moon. It was funny to hear.
Yeah, the fans understand that the hardcore fans and even the general fans just understand that come playoff time when it's for baseball, it's just different. It's just a different feeling. It's just a different game. It's tactics again are different. Just everything's different about playoff baseball versus regular season baseball, in my opinion. And it just makes it that much more enjoyable.
Yeah, definitely. Looking forward to. We'll keep tabs on the playoffs as they move forward.
Yeah, definitely. But might as well jump into the last topic here. This is for us a little bit of a longer episode, but we had 5 weeks of NFL to catch up on, teams, players, obviously. So just I guess this stems from a conversation that me and Andrew had on Saturday night. We were kind of talking about the All or Nothing docu-series on Amazon Prime for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and there was a specific part where I think I'll let Andrew explain it, because Andrew explained it pretty well off the get-go, and it kind of led into the debate. I don't want to misquote anything for what my guy was saying here, so I'm going to let Andrew kind of just talk about what the premise of the debate was.
Well, I think just like everybody else, I think a big part of what people have been talking about from the All or Nothing series is Sheldon Keefe, the coach. That's like pretty much a lot of people aren't even talking about the players. They're talking about what they thought about him. And, I'm not going to change anything that I said, because I've definitely thought about our conversation and talked to other people about it. But pretty much my whole point was knowing your players and knowing when to be strict and when to kind of get up on them. And from my understanding, your point was hey, you're a pro, you make the big bucks, you deserve to get shit on when you're playing poorly. And I was what I said to you was that the grasp I got from the documentary, and the first episode I watched, I was like, oh, this guy isn't hard on them enough, right? I was like, this guy tries to be too much of a player's coach. And then by the time the end of the second episode and in the middle of the third, I was like, okay, I respect this guy. He's actually kind of a dick. I was like, this guy can be kind of an asshole. Who was it when he walked up to Jimmy Vesey? And yeah, Jimmy Vesey's he's like, hey man, what do you think you're bringing to this team? Because it's not what I thought you were going to bring. And he was just sitting there, standing there on the ice next to him, what do I even say back to this? To my coach telling him, I'm not bringing what I. But my biggest argument was when they were playing the Habs, and this is coming from a Habs fan that was going nuts last year. My biggest argument was that not that they shouldn't be strict towards them, that when it's the second intermission, you're down in game 6, that might not be the time to absolutely crap all over your players, because at the moment, that's not what's that clearly hasn't worked, firing them up. And you were pretty much sound like you were saying to me, they deserve that. They make 11 million. And I know I chirped the shit out of them. Right.
I'll let you keep going. I'm going to have my,
and this is the thing. Me and you were going back and forth and interrupting each other all the time. So maybe you didn't even hear my point. Maybe this is the point you did hear. But my whole point was that they definitely deserve to get shit talked. And I've been the biggest, chirper as a Habs fan of Matthews and Marner, of how much they got paid. My whole point is that Marner seems to be, I'm not calling him a baby, but he's from Toronto, grew up a Maple Leafs fan. Clearly he felt horrible. There's so much pressure. He could easily play for a smaller market. Matthews can go to Arizona, and he'll be popular there, but he won't be like Toronto. My whole point I was trying to raise is that be hard on them. Tell them they're getting horrible. But when you're in the second intermission, and this guy already feels like ass for not scoring a goal the entire playoffs, it might not be the time to remind him how horrible he's played.
Yeah, so there's a lot to dive into there. I'll try and keep it concise, but so again,
let's hear it. Give it to me. Let's hear it.
I do agree with what you're saying. In principle, if we're just talking in generals, or kind of not specifically to this instance, I think 99.9% of what you said is is correct. You're not lying, or you're not just talking out of your ass. My whole thing is we've had 3 years of the Leafs disappointments in the playoffs, 3, 4, whatever you want to call it. But with this core group, we'll call it 3. How long can you hold someone like Marner's hand? How long can you physically just be it's going to come, buddy. It's all right. It's all right, man. We got you're in game 6. It's a must win. You haven't scored all playoffs. You're one of the best players on the team. You get paid like the best player on the team. how do I galvanize the fourth line with how do I get the rest of the guys going was my big thing. And sometimes you have to go with that guy that you baby, that guy that it's okay, Mitch, we'll get him. Like, he's probably done that the last couple of years. And at some point you have to show the rest of the locker room, like, hey, no one's above this team. If you're playing like ass, you're going to get called out. And to your point, when you say, why say it then? My point would be, when else are you going to say it? You're going to say it after the game, after you lost? Like, at that point, then you're just burying the guy. Like, once the game's over, the game's over. You can say he played bad or whatever, but at that point, like, sometimes you need to bury somebody like that and be a prick and be like, you haven't done anything. And I think with the Leafs, that Keith has tried to do an excellent job of being their friends and also being their coach, because they are young players now are a lot more sensitive. They do take things that the coach says to heart, and they do start to feel certain things, and it changes their perception on coaches and teammates and all of that stuff. So my bigger point is like, at some point after all this disappointment and all these times of kind of backing Mitch, at some point it has to come to a head where you have to show the rest of the locker room, like, even if you're the second best player on the team and you play like ass, you're going to get reamed out. And I just have a hard time not backing Keith in that situation, because I just, from everything I've read and I've heard about, like, the Leafs and watching this, like, he does try his best to be their friend. But at some point you have to treat people like professionals, and you have to treat people, in a work environment, and that's their work environment. And Mitch is getting paid like one of the best players in the league. And here we are in game 6 and you haven't given us a goal. What else can I say to you at that point? And that's just kind of, I think, where we got into a little bit of an argument is you were saying, like, there's a better time and a better place to do that. And my whole point is when else can you do that? Because you've done that the last 2 years where it's been, we're going to get them this year, guys. Like, it's all right. Last year.
But that's where we disagree, though, Jake. I got to step in. That's where we disagree, is that you say that after the game saying that to him is burying him. But I kind of say that the burying is in second intermission. That's kind of where we disagree. That's pretty much.
If my thing is so let's just say we're playing a game. We're just playing a game, bro. And me and you were on a team. And would you rather, and it's the championship game, would you rather me and you fight during the game and lose, or me wait till after we lost and I'm just like, you know what, Andrew, you fucking suck. Like, you played like shit. You didn't do anything for us that whole game we just played, that me and you both just battled through. I would rather, and this is just be me personally, and this is where we could differ. Like, if in the moment, I would rather you tell me what I'm doing wrong and me sit with that and try and figure that out, than wait till after the game's over, after we already lost. There's nothing else I can do about it. Nothing you're saying is going to fix anything of what just transpired. So why wait till the end of the game to say something when you're still playing the game and there's still a chance that the outcome could be different? I would rather have that.
But you're talking like that he was giving him actual game advice. That's the biggest thing. That's what I'm trying to say, though. You said quote for quote what I was doing wrong. He didn't say anything like that. He just said, you're getting fucking dominated.
Yeah, and that's what he's doing wrong. He's getting fucking dominated. But at the pro level, though, that's the difference. And like, at the pro level, you don't need someone to be like X, Y, and Z, you're doing wrong. You know in your head, every shift you go out there, whether you won that shift or you didn't. And you can do that even with amateurs, when you play ball or when you play like possession-wise or just anything. Specifically as a pro, when you're winning shifts, losing shifts, it was a good shift, bad shift. If your coach is telling you flat out in front of the locker room, you're getting fucking dominated, that means everywhere. He doesn't need to tell you exactly where.
Okay,
it's everywhere.
So here's my response to that. Do you do what a coach should do, or do you do what's going to help your team win? Because my whole thing that I've been saying is like, and I think like to certain degrees, we both agree with each other in a certain spot. Like, we're both sports fans and we've like played sports and stuff. My whole thing is that, like, sure, I agree with you. Like, that's what a coach should do. You know what I mean? Especially in hockey. I never even played hockey, but I know that that's how locker rooms are. And to your point, you're right. That's a good point you raised. Like, you don't need to give the X, Y, Z. However, given the X, Y, Z, maybe even 1 or 2 tips to say like, hey, you need to shoot the puck more off the face-off. Like, you're being too gun shy, not just like, hey, you're fucking sucking. But my whole point is that do you do what's like the cliche, like expected of you coach thing to do, or do you do what might help you win? Because all I'm trying to say is that I think that you say after the game doing that to him is burying him, but all I'm trying to say is it's burying him in the second intermission. And I don't care if he's getting paid 11 million or he's been babied already. I can guarantee you that didn't help him going into the third, being like, what he already knew was happening. My coach just reamed me out.
Let's think about. So I think about.
Let me ask you, does that help Marner though? Does him saying that help Marner's third period?
Yeah, it puts the self-awareness for Marner that he's letting his team down. You're one of the better players. Like, in a team, no matter how much someone says you're a team, you're a team, you're a team, there's very seldomly teams, from A to Z that all contribute equally. Very few.
Yeah.
There's very few incidents in any sport where the team is from top to bottom is just as good as each other. So for me, how as a locker room, we'll say, does it look for Keith to bury one of the best players during the game to motivate, or to bury him at the end of the game when there's no game after that? To me, what is the point of having that conversation?
No, and I get the principle behind it. Like, I'm not like, that's what I'm trying to say though. I get
that. And just like it, to me, it's more so like, as a locker room, I've been in locker rooms in sports where, like, it's not pro, but like, who the best players are and who are the character guys and the guys that, bring something different, we'll call it. Not less, but we'll call it different to the team. So like, when your best player or your second best player is playing bad and he gets reamed out, sometimes that just sends a shock to the locker room. And especially when it's a guy, like, I use always the example when the dad of a team or the dad of a player is the coach and he doesn't yell at his kid, but that first time he yells at his kid and you all just kind of are like, what the hell? Like, it just shocks the dressing room, right? It brings an attention to the dressing room. And I think that's what Keith was trying to do, is like, yes, Marner, you are playing like ass. You might be playing like the worst player on the team, but there's 7 other of you that are playing equally as bad. So instead of me, being like, oh, it's Marner, do this, this, and this, like, I need the locker room to respond. So I need to go at Marner. I need to go at the guy who's, the head of the snake, we'll say, with Matthews. Sometimes you need to do that. And I feel like now we're in sports, even as fans sometimes, or as media people, like, we say like, oh, that's not a good time to do that, or you're hurting his feelings, or this or that. Like, this is what the guy signed up for. As long as he's not like verbally abusing him and like like mentally putting him down and like making him feel less than as a person, like, that's what you kind of signed up for. And sometimes you need those people. Like, I always think about, it's a completely different sport. Jurgen Klopp, manager of Liverpool. The one thing that the locker room constantly says about him is he makes you want to run through a brick wall for him, whether you're playing or not. It's a mentality, it's a mindset, it's a way of being. Like, yes, you can see after the games, he hugs every single one of his players after the end of the game. He goes down to the fans. He's a very passionate, caring guy. But he knows when his best players are playing bad, they are subject to getting yelled at just as much as, the guy that doesn't play and who has less skill. It's all about, I think, creating that environment where your best players are held as accountable just as much as the guys who don't play. And to me, that's what I constantly go back to when I think about Keith doing that to Marner, is it's showing everybody in the locker room that everybody is accountable for how you play for this team. And I'm right. Again, it's not saying either of us are wrong. It's more so like personal preference, like what you would rather in that moment. Like, if you were in that moment, would you rather him do that to you then or do that to you at the end of the game? And I think that's different.
It's not really, and I'm not even trying to baby Marner. It's more like see, the thing is, I've always taken shots at, as much as people think that I chirp Marner and Matthews for their contract, a lot of it, like, everybody knows there's nobody else, there's no GM that has a bigger hot seat this year than Dubas. And like, there's just, it's point blank. And like, it's funny because in every media report that he gave out like 2-3 years ago, it was like, got to get Nylander signed, like, got to get Marner signed, like, got to get John, you know what I mean? Like, that was like their big 4 that covers half their salary. So we're sitting here about to start this next season on Tuesday, and there's no more Zach Hyman. You know what I mean? He's off to play with the Oilers and better the other Canadian team with the best player in the world. You know what I mean? Because they have the cap space. So to me, it's almost like, let's look at it like this, especially. I always said this as a Habs fan last year. How many goals in key moments did the Leafs score on the power play? How many less power play goals are there in the playoffs, or how many less penalties are there in the playoffs? A lot less. So, like, to me, to kind of like just to be the contrarian to what you said there, I get it. It's like, you've been the backbone to our team the whole season. So, like, I understand, like, you're not going to chew out the fourth line, or he's not going to say like, hey, you're playing bad, because like, what's that going to mean to the locker room? But if I'm a Leafs player and I know that Marner and Matthews scored like a good percentage of our goals in the entire season, and then I hear our coach say that you're sucking, it's like, damn, if my best player is sucking, then fuck, we're screwed. You know what I mean? Like, that's not making me fired up. It's making me be like, damn, our coach just like fucking ripped on that guy. He has no confidence in him, and we're going to the third period.
Yeah, again, I think that just boils down to almost like a mentality mindset, right? Where like me, if we're playing, like if me and you are playing pickup ball, and you don't have it that day, it's like, fuck, I got to work hard. Like I got to get after this now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like,
wait, just I'm not trying to be rude, but I agree with that. I think that does. I agree with your point that fires up the rest of the team. My whole point is that might not fire up Marner. That might certainly fire up the other guys. I agree with you on that.
In game 6, when he's had 6 games of playing awful, I think Dubas kind of knows that Marner for this series is gone. Like in game 6, you're just using Marner as the scapegoat for the rest of the locker room, because Marner's on the highest pedestal of the guys playing bad. So throughout the year, Marner probably has the biggest leash on, taking penalties, bad plays, late for practices. Not saying he does any of those things, but I'm saying like as a star player, like he gets all of those.
I'll tell you what, if you would have said that on Saturday, we literally would have stopped talking like 2 minutes in, because I agree with that.
Yeah, it's just,
if you would have said that on Saturday, there would have been no argument, because I agree with you.
It's not even an argument. I don't think. I think it's a good debate. More like deep, like to like another layer down is like the mentality of the locker room and what works versus what doesn't for specific locker rooms, right? Because like I've been in locker rooms where if you fucking yelled at any of the guys on the team, it's just like, all right, well, we're not playing hard. Like, fuck this. Yeah. I didn't come here to get yelled at. Like, you know what I mean? Yeah. You have to know the locker room. And I think like, again, it just goes back to more like the point now where it's like, I feel like there's a lot shorter of a leash of like what and when you're allowed to say things versus like maybe 10 or 20 years ago, where there's a lot more of a, I would say like an awareness to people's feelings and mentals and, different things, right, that are super important to that make up these athletes. So that's why I think it's cool to have a conversation like this, where we're both coming from a different mindset, where it's like, we've come from different experiences and different things, and just kind of just like talk it out, be like, all right, well, like, this is what I think and this is what you think. And like, neither of us are wrong. It's just
no. And like, as much as like mindset. I'm not trying to be like the sensitive side either. Like, I'm just like, and I know that like we've talked before, but, and you said like, you've been in locker room. So I'm going to say like from my coaching experience, like one thing that I've learned, and this, I think 100% this applies to every coach, no matter what level it is. Your players make you look good as a coach. You'd agree with that, right?
Definitely.
So like, I've coached some teams. Like I was a part of the same team for like 3 years as a coach. It was cool to see us develop. And like seeing that guy that was in grade 8 turn into a grade 12 player, right? I developed that relationship with him. And I knew that like, if he wasn't doing well for us, that like in a couple game stretch, we weren't going to win, right? So you use that leash like metaphor, and I agree with that. And so I think that's also a reason why you rarely get pissed off at your better player, because it's like, well, fuck, like he's the guy that makes me look good. Like if Marner and Matthews, let's be honest, like if Marner and Matthews aren't playing well in the regular season, it makes Keith look bad. You know what I mean? So like, to
Keith's
that
the one
point,
that's gonna lose his job. Like,
exactly, not them. So like, so when I would call timeouts, it would be, to your point, very rare for me to actually like go off on the guy that's usually does really well for me, because it's like, well, without him, I wouldn't even be in the semifinals right now.
Definitely.
But to your point, once you do chew that guy out, everybody should recognize like he's getting chewed out because he's playing like horrible.
Yeah.
I've just, so like, not to get too off track, but like volleyball. It's like a little bit. So like setter is the main position. It's like the captain, like they run. It's like the quarterback in football, right? So like if my guy came off and like I was like, if he was like just it's pretty much like if anyone doesn't know volleyball, it's like you're the guy that sets everybody up, right? So like if he's doing a bad job of setting people up, and he's like real bad, like embarrassingly bad, I gotta tell him. But like if we're in like the semifinals and it's like the last set, fifth set, like game goes to 15 and the score is 14-13 and we're down, and I call a timeout, I gotta think to myself, like, there's a maximum of only a few points remaining. Do I want to absolutely tell him how dog shit he's been, or like hype him up to tell him I know what he can do? And I get it, he's not making 11 million, and it's hard to compare amateur, high school volleyball.
Yeah, I think that just goes back to like the person and like the locker room. Like you would have a full awareness of what type of person that is, because some people don't respond to getting yelled at. That's an absolute fact. That some people, if you yell at them, it's just going to make them play worse.
Yeah.
So again, I think it just comes down to, like you said, like knowing the players, knowing your locker room, like having that development. You've been with the team for 3 years. Keith was with the team for 3 years. So it's just one of those things that I guess we kind of have to chalk up to just, you almost have to be there. Like it's easy for us to sit here and do this, but it's just one of those things that we're just going to agree to disagree. But we're running a little long here, buddy. So we'll wrap this up. Everybody make sure to check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Periscope. Great golf tournament just happened. Make sure to go check out those pictures. Make sure to check us out, sportsinteraction.com/Mayflower, 18 plus, 125 percent bonus. Deposit bonus. And it's good to be back. We haven't done one of these in a long time. That's why it ran a little long. We had a lot to catch up on, but look forward to doing this again next week with you, Andrew. Any closing words for yourself?
Happy Thanksgiving to all the Canadians out there. I appreciate you guys.
Thanksgiving. Peace.